it's Amy with the Hag Reads. I am here with a video. I'm doing one book today. My son got sick last week, at the end of the week, so I stopped filming just because I had some extra chores and stuff to do, and you know, kind of running in and checking on him. He doesn't do sick well, and he doesn't get sick very often, but when he does, it's pretty ugly. So I did that, and then I spent the weekend reading, so I thought I would just come back with a video on Monday and start from there. The book I'm going to talk about today is The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. And this book has kind of had a smear campaign against it. I don't know if it was in early 2017, late 2016. I think the evolution is that when it first came out, it got a lot of good reviews. A lot of people liked it, praising it, giving it 4 and 5 star reviews. And then a few bloggers or reviewers who are, you know, on Goodreads and BookTube really took a disliking to it for some of its themes and its handling of sensitive issues. And basically, 1 or 2 people wrote reviews and then encouraged people to link that review to their 1-star review without reading the book, based on information in their review. And they were quite successful at this. When I checked after I had read it, there were a pretty equal split of 4 and 5 star reviews and 1 and 2 star reviews, and then, you know, a few smattering very low 3-star reviews. You know, of all of the reviews, 3-star kind of had the least, and that's usually the most on any given book, unless it's very, very popular or has been very hyped. At least that's the pattern I've noticed on Goodreads for the few hyped books that I've read. But I'm kind of appalled that this happened, because it smacks of censorship and, you know, the whole banned books thing, which there's a banned books week every year hosted by the public library, and this is basically shaming the author, shaming the publisher, by people who, by and large, for the most part, not exclusively, but for quite a few of these reviews, they said, I haven't read this book, I'm never going to read this book, I am simply on here to give this book a 1-star review at somebody else's behest, based on things they said, without ever having examined this topic for myself to see if it's true. Now, the original author, and I only looked at one of these, but I saw that there were 2 or 3 that were linked that were from, I suppose, different people, and not just copying and pasting the same review by different people. Quoted extensively out of the book, but largely out of context, giving a very skewed, negative view of this book. And it does deal with, you know, a lot of the themes are, let's see here, I wrote them down. I can do this. Hold on one second. I wrote it down somewhere. There's a whole list, and I don't want to miss anything. Hold on. Okay, found my little list. So it deals with largely the big broad themes are misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, racism, and ableism. So those are the main themes that are dealt with in the book, and the main character is a girl, Ellerin, who has been kind of raised away from the city in a you know, kind of led a sheltered life with her uncle and her 2 brothers. Has been raised, you know, in a very specific environment, not exposed to people who are different from herself, no different races or colors really, no different ethnicities or beliefs. She's been raised in a pretty homogenic environment, and so has a large number of prejudices that have been taught to her, in which, you know, because we largely accept the things that our communities teach us, that our church teaches us, that our family teaches us, that our communities teach us. You know, when we're talking about a small village, and then a larger, you know, society that's run mostly by white people, and they're like shimmering, glowy white people who are said to be like a first people, and that every other race is a degenerate race in some way. It's diluted, it's polluted, it's impure, this sort of thing, which are themes that you see in, let's say, in colonial era, in slave owning eras of the South, but it pushes well beyond that, where white people kind of went everywhere that there were brown people and decided that they were primitive and tribal and in many cases less than human, and that the white people could, under the guise of a paternalistic interest in bettering them through religion and, you know, the trappings of their society, took things from them: land, resources, the people themselves. So it's nothing that we have, nothing in this book in terms of those themes of misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, racism, are things we haven't dealt with in our very recent past, relatively speaking. So I'm not sure why people are so outraged by this book, other than they're uncomfortable with it being laid out like in such a... So you take the character who's been sheltered and raised in it to believe a specific thing, has never encountered people that taught her anything different than what she's learned from her own family, from her local community, from the church that she goes to, you know, the religious institution that isn't part of the main ruling class propaganda. So really has just bought it hook, line, and sinker through sheer lack of exposure. You know, it's ignorance on her part. She doesn't know any better. She's never, you know, and this is a fault of the uncle, I would say, had access to all, you know, the true histories of other peoples in this world that's being built here. So I want to say that they're not wrong that these themes are there, but I think this negative smear campaign is wrong about the usefulness of it. There's something very wrong with one or two people reading a book, or even 10 or 12 or 20 or 100 people reading a book and deciding that nobody else should read it, and then going forward on Goodreads, on BookTube, on blogs, and pushing an agenda that is designed to take the book out of circulation, to encourage people not to read it, not to think about the issues, not to really look at how the book is written and what it's trying to do. Just to go screaming, you know, nobody should ever read this, running around with their hair on fire, rather than dealing with what makes them uncomfortable about the themes. I'm going to pause again. I want to just collect my notes and make sure I don't just keep going off on a tangent here. So one of the things I wanted to say is that in the review, and I'm not going to link it, and I'm not even going to say who's the author. If you're interested, it's one of the first reviews that comes up on Goodreads. And the big problem I have with this is the blog that this review links to, and the review itself on Goodreads. the comments are disabled. So there's no discourse about this. The person has put this out there and left no way for anyone to question it, to present a counter argument of any kind. Whereas many of the positive reviewers who have come after, I didn't look very far back. Like, I didn't go all the way back to the beginning. I read maybe 40 reviews overall, positive and negative, after I had read the book. And for the most part, the people who left positive reviews really examined, in the face of this smear campaign, the positive ways that these themes can be used to spur your own kind of introspective or even discussionary type of things based on these themes, and why what went on in the book made people feel so uncomfortable. I thought that that the main character was thoughtfully presented, not a likable character for pretty much the whole book. It's designed to be a redemption arc of a character who is she's not misogynistic, but there are some very misogynistic themes in the book. She's homophobic, certainly xenophobic. There are many elements of racism in the book, sexism, but she's got three of the main points. Definitely homophobic, definitely xenophobic, definitely racist based on her upbringing. And so she's living in this village, and she's underexposed to other cultures, and we're led to believe that she has no magic, zero magic ability. So here's where the misogyny comes in. Women in this, in the Gardnerian race, which is the white people race, are encouraged to do this thing called wand fasting. And so it's basically a magical linking between a future husband and wife, and it's encouraged as young as age 13 in the current storyline. And I believe from my reading that this is kind of a controversial thing. 13 is awfully young to choose your future mate and be magically bound to them for life. So what happens if you break this wand fasting, the person who breaks it is physically harmed. They are scarred, they are cause pain, and I think it's an ongoing pain. It's not like a one-time thing. And as the storyline moves on, and this is a spoiler, I will mark this in the title and in the comments that there will be some spoilers. I'm going to try not to spoil the whole book, but there's a few points that I want to bring up that will maybe spoil a little parts of the book. So this part is kind of spoilery. And the current council, which is the government, is trying to, the person who's like, I guess he would be likened to, I guess, a Donald Trump of this era, somebody who's trying to conservative, trying to take away the rights of the other races in the book. And so you have races like, you have the Gardnerians, which is the white race. You have elves. So you have kind of and all of the other races are presented by the Gardnerian as corrupted in some way, diluted or polluted. So the elves have like a main race, and then there are sub races where there's like a serpent type of elf who's an instructor at the school. And so there are these sub races that are, I think, largely accepted within the elvish community, but not at all. They're viewed as disgusting and, that sort of thing, highly inappropriate. The conservatives feel this is a highly inappropriate instructor in a university. And so you see a form of racism and classism there. There's the there's like an Amazon race in here. There's lupins, which are wolf shifters, and there's Icarals, which are can occur in any of the races, but it's basically the result of there were previously a wyvern race, which was kind of a dragon race, and I don't think they're around anymore, but again, it's a mixing of races. So in it can occur in any race, but it's the result of intermixing of blood. And so you could have two normal children and then this winged kind of very different. They're viewed at, it's almost a scapegoat kind of character. They're considered evil and dangerous, and they clip their wings and put them in asylums. I can do this. There's the Celts, which are kind of barbarian peasant and extremely intermixed race. And then there was one, I don't think I wrote it down. I'm kind of disappointed. Oh, the Urisk, which is a servant class. And these are literally colored people. They can be, they're kind of pastel colored people. But I guess the lighter the skin, the higher of a servant class it is, and the darker the skin, the lower class, or the less sophisticated or intelligent they're perceived to be. And I think we see through the book that all of these races are, and the characters within are pretty well drawn. They're well-rounded. You get a glimpse of each type of race into what they're really all about as the main character encounters them in real life situations and gets to know them over the period of the school year, where all of her beliefs, everything she's been told and everything she believes, the core of her being that she's been taught by her own family, by her own race, by the religious institution that she participates in, is radically different from how it really is. And so the university is really like universities are supposed to be today, a place where you go and I made a little note here that I thought I could bringing people together, different races, different cultures, ethnicities, sexualities, all of that kind of thing. A breaking down of your preconceived ideas, exposure to ideas outside of your own family, outside of your own religion, and not trying to make you believe something you don't want to, but what you believe, what your religion believes, what your family believes, isn't the only way to believe or do or be. And so a lot of people come to college in reality and find that their belief systems challenged, or at least they're often exposed to ideas and people that they have maybe never encountered before in their lives. And so it challenges their preconceived ideas and broadens their minds and their horizons and allows them to grow as human beings. And so that's really what there's everything. There's the Icarals at this university, there's the servant class, there's the Celts, and so they're all in the university together, and they're forced to room together under the current council. But the person who's trying to get in as the new ruler is trying to change that. There was a time when the different races were segregated in their housing and I suppose classes too, where only the same type of people took classes from a teacher who was from their race, maybe. That part wasn't very clear, but I presume that it was all very segregated at one point, and certainly some races were probably excluded. But as it currently sits, as the novel is taking off, there's very equal representation in terms of percentages of population. There are 2 Icarals, and then there's more of everything else. But Icarals are a very small part of the population, and because they're being controlled and hunted, and their wings are being clipped, and they're considered dangerous, a lot of them are put away by their families into asylums, and where they are abused and drugged And they're led to believe by pretty much all of society that they're just bad. So, so the main character comes to the university, um, because the uncle refuses to allow her to be wand fasted, even though she's 17 and she's reaching an age where it's very uncommon for a girl not to be wand fasted. He wants her to get her education first, and these wand fastings are encouraged before girls go for their education, and I think in some cases, in place of education, marry her off before she goes and gets exposed to all this different cultures and informations. And her aunt comes from her aunt Viviane, I think, and is really pushing that she needs to be wand fasted, that she shouldn't go unattached to the university, because of something that happened to the local community, where an unwand fasted girl had gone to the university and met a Celt and fell in love with him and ran off, and so she was scarred from her wand fasting. So the aunt is using that as an argument for why the main character should be wand fasted before she goes for her education. And I think almost the aunt would prefer she wasn't getting an education. She doesn't have, so the main character has no magic ability, going to a magic school. What she wants to become is an apothecary, basically their equivalent of an herbalist. I found the setup of the school very interesting. It's not, it's kind of in the vein of Hogwarts, but not exactly. Certainly, Harry Potter dealt with themes, with the purebloods and the mudbloods of racism, classism, that sort of thing. But I think the Black Witch goes much further into depth. You really are seeing this character who's completely unlikable go through this arc, and she does whiny things. She has this love interest for a short amount of time who basically comes, and he's from one of the elite families, and he comes in and he threatens the kitchen staff because they were mean to her, like threatens them with violence and exposure. And, so she takes his advice and does all these horrible things to these different groups of people who already don't like the Gardnerians just for what they are, because they know that their rhetoric is bullshit, essentially. And I think, you see her grow a little and slide back and grow a little and slide back and grow. And she really, for like the first almost 2/3 of the book, is justifying these really crappy things she's done to people, because the way they treated her reinforced what she already believed. And how often does that happen in real life? Where somebody, you see, and I'll use politics as an example, where it's perpetrated that X group of immigrants, they're, what Trump did, they're racist, or they're not racist, but they're dangerous, they're sending us their rapists, they're not sending us their best people, that sort of thing. So she looks at what she perceives as their meanness, their unfair treatment of her as a privileged person, and she is extremely privileged, as a justification for being a shitty person herself and for behaving in a way that is completely racist, classic, or a classist. She does very horrible things. So you see her, forward, backward, and she starts to develop relationships with professors and other students, and we start to see her blossom in bits. And so you see with the Lupins, there's this belief that they're sexually promiscuous, and all the stereotypical things that you see now about that type of character, where they run around naked in the woods and they're fornicating, pell-mell. They'll basically mate with anyone, anytime, no morals, no. But she comes to find out that all these beliefs she's held, when she meets these characters, there's a brother and a sister in some of her classes, and slowly over time, she hates them at first and they hate her. Um, Comes to realize that everything she's ever been told about them, and all these little gossipy stories they tell about, oh, my dad was at, this gathering, and these two people stood up, and this is an example from the book. These two people stood up, announced their intention to mate, and went off into the woods to have sex. But when the brother and sister described it, they said, but it's mating for life. They don't mate, and it's abhorrent to them that in the Gardnerian race, they're basically made to get married to somebody they may not even care about. They have this on the particularly the female character of the Lupin goes around naked, comes out of the wood naked in front of these these Gardnerian men, and Ellerin is trying to explain to her, is it Ellerin? Yeah, I think Ellerin is trying to explain to her that because she's naked, these men will assume that she's promiscuous and will mate with will have sex with anybody. And the Lupin girl is very offended. She's like, they're not even good enough for me to consider that, and we don't do that anyway. Like, righteous indignation level of disbelief that anybody would think that. And so it's a learning process on both sides of that. And so I found that process very interesting. So in the smear campaign, you don't get that other side of that. And for all the people who didn't read the book and gave the 1-star review, they're missing the give and take. Yes, this character is definitely in the wrong. We are not meant to like her. I think, as a reader, I was hoping eventually we would get there and we would like her. But even at the end of the book, because it ended in a cliffhanger, still not very likable. The least likable of all the characters here. And so, but the redemption arc is a very slow crawl. And you're watching her struggle with this, where everything she's ever believed, she believed her grandmother was a hero, that her great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather was a hero. Only, spoiler, very spoiler, super spoiler, that both her grandmother and her, whichever the grandfather or the, grandmother, so great-great or however many greats bond it was, these are religious zealots who are rewriting history for their own agenda. Where have we seen that before? White people everywhere on the planet Earth. They're rewriting history. They're committing genocide, essentially. And the prime example is the servant class. Basically, in the last war, they killed all the male Urisk people. And so there's largely just this female class who, in order to propagate, would have to mate with other races, because there are none or almost no males of their own race to mate with, because they've been exterminated. So she's slowly finding out through all of this that the history she's been taught is completely false and has been rewritten, and that there is no true pure race. They're all, and that's true of the human race here. There is no pure white race. We're all a mixture of many things. And all you have to do is take one of those DNA tests where you swab your cheek and they send you back a thing that tells you all of your genetic, linkings. So you see her really struggling with this. And I didn't feel sorry with her for the struggle, because she's really... I've said it more than once, not a nice character. This is not whiny, self-righteous, so privileged and a sense of entitlement, but not nearly as much as, I feel like the bad guy characters in here. So there's the guy that's trying to become the head counselor, a Volk or something like that. So he's extremely right-wing, conservative, would love to, I think, just commit mass genocide against every other race and only have white people left in this, the Gardnerian race in this book. He wants to imprison and eradicate and enslave as much as he can. And then there's the, the main character, Elloren's nemesis, is Fallon, who's from one of the elite families like Lucas, the temporary love interest. And they're very privileged, and particularly Fallon and her brothers are very abusive of their power. They do things that aren't supposed to be allowed with their magic. Just mean, petty things, so they're the most one-sided characters in the book. They seem to just exist to be elitist assholes who are entitled, like the cream of the crop there, who basically would march over the bodies of children with a sense of entitlement that it's their right to do so, to subjugate anybody, to do whatever they want. And so the purpose of the arc is that they're trying to determine, because a prophecy says that the new Black Witch, who was her grandmother, who committed this genocide in the name of her beliefs and her religious proclivities, but the next Black Witch is supposed to bring about another turning of the tide. And of course the conservatives think it's going to be this genocide, and I think there's another side hoping that that whoever is the next Black Witch is going to turn the tide the other way and put a more liberal spin on this, and maybe put a stop to all of this homicidal, genocidal, xenophobic lawmaking that's going on, or trying to be passed, because this guy, I think his name is Volk, but I could be very wrong, is trying to pass repeatedly these bills or these orders, whatever they're, it's been a few days since I read the book, so a lot of the term, but essentially they're trying to push these laws that take these classes out of the university, that take them out of positions of power, that take them out of jobs and such in the community that would, earn them status or power or money, and to put everything in the hands of their own people. And then the one thing I haven't talked about is there's these Selkie characters, and they're human. It's what you think. It's the women with the seal skins. And basically what happens is the Gardnerians catch them, take away their seal skins, and use them as sex slaves, and sell them like property. So there's a character in the book that Elloren rescues who's being abused, and she can't speak human language, so I think it's easy for many people to just assume that she's less than human because she can't speak in a way that they understand. So this deals with, slavery, treating a certain type of person as subhuman, and so whatever you want to do with them is okay. And here the aunt's view is, she doesn't coach us this way to Elloren, but her view is that these Selkies should just be exterminated because of the unsavoriness of what they're used for, rather than giving them back their skins and letting them go back to the ocean and be their own community or society. She just wants to exterminate them. And so they're treated like property, and can be killed, abused, and used in whatever way the owner would like. So I feel like within this world, the author has really built a narrative that deals with everything that's ugly in human society, past, present, and probably future, and provides a platform for discussion, for thought, and just for and it has entertainment value, but this is certainly not a book you're going to read for the Harry Potter feels, you know. This is a book about serious topics that's going to make you think, that's not going to make you happy. I don't think this book was intended to be a light, frivolous read. I think it's meant to provoke your emotions and make you think about why this is so uncomfortable, all the issues dealt with in here. Homophobia was a big one. The main character's brother turns out to be gay. One of her brothers turns out to be gay, and the other one becomes interested in the Lupin female and is thinking of becoming a Lupin himself. But when she finds out the brother's gay and he doesn't want to be wand-faceted and pretend to be straight, she's mortified. What will people think? You know, how can he be this way? He should never tell anybody. You can feel a sense of fear in her that what would happen to him if anybody found out. But I also, on the flip side, feel a bigger part of that was, what would people think of her if they found out he was gay? Like, it's such a horrible thing. So yeah, there's homophobia in this, but how many families are still out there where they're trying to send them to be cured, because that still happens now, or where they're disowned even at a very young age, from families, and where people run away from home because, you know, they can't be who they are. This is still an ongoing issue. Yes, the alphabet soup of, you know, human sexuality is much more accepted now than it has ever been, but there is still a long way to go. And not that long ago, the attitude that she expresses towards her brother and the fear for herself in that was legitimate and openly expressed by people of all colors and races about homosexuality. Anybody who is different, you know, people died, people had to hide who they were for fear of their lives and their livelihoods and that of their families. So I feel like it addressed like every kind of issue you could possibly think of in an engaging and semi-entertaining way, and that this is a book that should be read. It's aimed at a YA audience, and like One of Us is Lying, I think this should be read in classrooms. It should be read by families and discussed. It should be something that anybody who wants to expand their own thoughts on, you know, prejudices are complicated. You can hold them and not even really know you're holding them until you get into an environment that's unfamiliar to you, and then you're like, oh my God, you know. So I feel like it deals with a complicated issue in a way that allows so many different, every issue is touched on. So you can touch on everything that's ugly in human society and really think about and discuss with others if the opportunity is available. This is an opportunity to address in a classroom, in a family setting, in a community sort of way. The way that your community and your family and your church or your religion shapes what you believe about others, and that you may not even be aware of until you go out in the world and discover, oh boy, I'm wrong about a lot of things. And, you know, think about how if you were taught a certain way, everything, and everybody believed the same thing and all of that, and then you went to a job somewhere, or you went to the university, you know, away from home, and you suddenly discover that literally everything you've ever believed is wrong, how hard that would be for you to deal with, that you wouldn't understand it. And I think that it deals with her process in a realistic way. Um, Not that it makes her any more likable, but that she didn't just have this magical band-aid rip of, oh, everything I've ever known is wrong. You can really see her struggling with it, like trying to get to the right place, but also still being petty and whiny and tending to backslide into her original beliefs based on things people do that she feels like reinforces what she was taught as, while she was growing up. So, I respect this book. And here's my big kicker at the end. There is supposed to be a sequel to this book, and I would be damn surprised if, one, if it ever actually comes out, and two, if it doesn't take this story in a totally different direction because of the pressures that have been put on it through the smear campaign. I don't know how far this went because I'm not going to look any further. I'm disgusted by what happened. I can't believe that so many people, we're talking about several thousand people here, just decided that this was a bad book, having never read it. And I think that they harassed the author, the publisher. They have smeared it on Goodreads, probably Amazon. I did not go and look at Amazon, but I think Goodreads is owned by Amazon. So I imagine a very similar thing going on Amazon, possibly other places, certainly in blogs. I know there was some of it on YouTube. I've seen very little positive about this book on YouTube, period. I think Indie Insomniac did a video that I watched after I read the book, and his was very insightful and probably a lot better put together than mine. So you should give him a look if you haven't already. He's got an excellent booktube podcast, and his views on this book were very well thought out, and he's very well spoken. He made a lot of salient points, and he did it very succinctly, which I haven't managed to do, but I've at least put out there what I think. I can't believe that people went out without having read this, knowing the history of banned books, and with censorship being such a big issue, and for a large part of human history, many people couldn't be who they were. Women couldn't, hold power, very subjugated, and that issue's dealt with in here. Couldn't vote, for people of color of any sort of flavor, it was very late in the game for them to get rights, period, and then to get equal rights. And so it's been, there's all this struggle that people would just quote out of context, and that droves of people would go, this is bad, nobody should read this, this book should have never been published. And the end result of that, I think we'll see a second book, if we ever see the second book, that will not do this redemptive story arc any justice. I think that it will be a complete cop-out. And I hope I'm wrong, but I really think that we're not going to see something that takes the full arc of all the possibilities in the same way. But this is, I think a realistic redemptive arc with the backsliding and the everything. So I think that's a shame that this smear campaign that went on will probably inhibit the author and the publisher from publishing whatever it is she originally wanted to. I think it's going to be a very different, if it occurs at all, from what was perhaps originally intended. And I think it will be a shitty read, because I don't think that the publisher will give this author the platform she needs to finish the book with the same in-depth study of, some very serious issues that are salient to now. So that's all I have to say about this. I really loved this book. I can't recommend it enough. It is YA. It is If you have trigger issues, we're talking about, you know, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, racism. Um, there's some rapey elements to this. There's a lot of things that can trigger. So and you have to come into it knowing that you're not going to like the main character. This isn't a light, fluffy piece about somebody who turns their life around like that. We get to see the full Monty here, the whole struggle, and we get to see her be an asshole, you know. So, that's all I've got. If you have thoughts different than this, I am welcome to this, but I am not welcome to you coming on here and telling me how stupid I am because I don't hate this book and because I did not read it. No, that's not right. Because I read it instead of just taking the top reviewer's advice of throwing the book against the wall or burning it. I definitely intend on buying this for my library, the same as One of Us is Lying. I think these are excellent books for teens, for older teens who are ready to dive into some serious issues, and really look at things that make us feel uncomfortable, but that are still salient and need to be thought about and addressed and discussed publicly. You know, where's the debate about this? It's not, you know, I think that for young people should be happening, and probably for older people based on the response, because I don't think any of these negative reviews were written by a YA audience. I think they were written by adults, probably young adults, who decided that nobody should read this book. And I don't think that was the initial response. So I'm not sure what really triggered that, other than somebody who just went, you know, who read it and took the very worst of it and said, these issues should never, ever be addressed in this way. You can only put them forth in a way that's light and fluffy and doesn't trigger anybody and doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. And that's not how this works. You know, xenophobia and racism and sexism and misogyny are not comfortable topics, and it should challenge you to think about why you feel uncomfortable reading this. I will be back with some lighter fare in my next video. I really, really did enjoy this book. I gave it 5 stars. I was actually going to give it 4 stars because I think that there were, you know, because she's such an unlikable character. But in light of all the 1-star reviews, I bumped it up just because I think a lot of those were unfairly given, especially by people who never read the book. That's what offends me the most. You didn't even bother to think for yourself. You let somebody else tell you what to think. And that's never a good idea. Don't let other people tell you what you think about something you haven't even bothered to think about, read, look at, examine. That's very dangerous. Outside of that, I hope that you are having a great week or start to your week. I hope that, you know, happy whatever time of day it is for you. I hope that you had a wonderful day today or yesterday, you know, and I will see you next time. Bye.